Ever wondered what it's like to assist in a ritual that opens the door to something otherworldly? This is the terrifying true story that made me believe in both God and ghosts. Prepare yourself for a chilling encounter you won't forget. My uncle is a priest who helps people get rid of negative energies in their lives, no matter the form. Back in college, I worked part-time as his assistant. It's something I've never talked about before. Whenever he went to someone's house to perform rituals, I helped him with whatever he needed. One evening, my uncle called me and said, "Be ready by 7:30 p.m. Since it was my first time assisting him, I was really curious about what I would see. He packed his sacred items, and we left for the house of a Brahmin family that was suffering due to black magic. At first I acted calm and thought about the money I'd earn. When the ritual began, my uncle wore his sacred clothes. He walked to a specific spot in the house, threw some lemon and leaves there, and told the family to start digging. They dug about 2 feet deep. My uncle stopped them, grabbed a handful of mud, and placed it on banana leaves. In the mud, we found bones, hair, gold, and bronze items. My uncle explained that this was a form of black magic meant to harm the family. It would cause the elders in the house to die within 6 months, and the energy itself could even move around. As his assistant, my job was to burn everything we found. I poured petrol over it and set it on fire. While I was burning the items, my uncle, who stood about 10 to 15 feet away, suddenly turned toward me. He looked up at the sky and shouted, "Get lost or I'll destroy you." I froze. There was no one around except the house owner, my uncle, and me. The women and children were inside the house. Curious, I looked up. My heart almost stopped. I saw a terrifying female demon, with a strong and monstrous appearance, climbing a tree like a lizard. My uncle immediately came to me. He took an egg, circled it around me, and then broke it on the ground. To my shock, blood came out of the egg. I barely escaped that night. This incident convinced me that there are things in this world we can't see with our own eyes. Imagine being invited to dinner by a cousin you've never met, and discovering that the family you visited might not have been real at all. Stay tuned as I unravel this eerie experience that still haunts me today. About 7 years ago, I received an invitation to a dinner party from a cousin I'd never met before. We had only spoken on the phone, so I was surprised when his family suddenly invited me after all these years. The invitation included an address that wasn't recognized by GPS, so I had to use a map to mark the location. As I drove, I realized I was heading far away from civilization. The scenery was nothing but endless trees and farms. I couldn't help but think, where the hell am I going? Eventually, I arrived at a house that matched the address. The place looked old and lifeless, covered in leaves and branches. This can't be the place, I thought to myself. As soon as I pulled into the rocky driveway, an older couple, my supposed aunt and uncle, came out to greet me. They seemed excited to see me and were very welcoming. When I walked into the house, I asked about my cousin. They quickly replied, "Oh, he's out running errands. He'll be back later." We spent hours chatting about my mother and family. My aunt made a delicious homemade pot roast, which I finished in no time. After dinner, we played an intense game of Uno. Surprisingly, it was a lot of fun and very competitive. By the time we finished playing, it was dark, and my cousin still hadn't shown up. I decided it was time to leave, as I didn't want to get lost driving out of that eerie area at night. Since my GPS wasn't working, I asked my aunt and uncle for the quickest way to the highway. They gave me a confused look and said, "We thought you were staying the night." I told them I couldn't because I had work the next day and couldn't afford to miss it. My uncle insisted, "It's better if you leave in the morning. Trust me, you'll get lost." I brushed it off, assuring them that I was good with directions and could navigate out of anywhere, even the Sahara Desert. They looked frustrated and kept insisting I stay for the night. Their persistence started to irritate me. Finally, I sighed and agreed, saying, "Fine, I'll stay. But I have to leave early for work." As soon as they went to get me bedding, I bolted out the door, jumped into my car, and sped off down the driveway. It took some time, but I eventually found my way out of that strange, depressing place and made it home about an hour later than I'd planned. It was around 11 p.m., and I didn't want to wake my parents. So I climbed the fence and entered through the back door. To my surprise, the kitchen lights were on. My mom was sitting there, looking impatient. "Where were you?" she asked. "I was at Aunt Deborah's, you knew that," I replied. Her expression turned serious. "Then why did she call, saying you never showed up?" To this day, I have no idea whose house I visited. What if I told you a haunting so terrifying could end in death itself? This is the chilling tale of the Bell Witch, an evil spirit that tormented an entire family and even predicted its victim's demise. You won't believe how this story ends. The Bell Witch haunting is one of the scariest stories in American folklore, based on real-life events that have terrified people for generations. The tale begins in the early 1800s in Adams, Tennessee, where John Bell, a successful farmer, and his family started experiencing bizarre and frightening occurrences that lasted for years. It began with strange noises. At first, the Bell family heard soft knocking on the walls of their log cabin, but soon, the sounds grew louder and more unsettling. They heard chains dragging across the floor, scratching and gnawing noises, and unexplained thuds echoing through the night. Then, the attacks started. The Bell children were the first victims of the witch's torment. They felt invisible hands slapping them and pulling their hair. Betsy, one of the daughters, became the main target. She would wake up with bruises and handprints on her face, and her hair would often be found tied to the bedposts. Night after night, the family endured this terror, with no way to explain or stop it. As time went on, the spirit revealed itself as the ghost of a woman named Kate Batts, a neighbor who had allegedly cursed John Bell for reasons that were never fully understood. The witch's voice began to echo throughout the house, mocking and taunting the family. Sometimes she would sing hymns in an eerily beautiful voice, only to switch to shrieks and wild laughter moments later. The Bell Witch's terror wasn't limited to the Bell home. Neighbors and visitors also experienced her wrath. A preacher who tried to exorcise the spirit was physically attacked, and the witch's voice followed him, predicting his death in gruesome detail. The spirit would sometimes appear as a dark shadow or as a disfigured woman. John Bell's health began to deteriorate quickly. The witch targeted him relentlessly, promising to end his life. On December 20th, 1820, John was found dead in his bed, his face twisted in pain. A mysterious vial of liquid was found nearby, and the witch claimed she had poisoned him. Even after John's death, the haunting didn't completely stop. The witch continued to torment Betsy, and her presence was felt by others in the community for years. Before vanishing, the Bell Witch claimed she would return in 107 years, in 1935. Although no clear reports of her return exist, the legend lives on, and the land where the Bell farm once stood remains a place of mystery. Today, the Bell Witch Cave, near the site of the original farm, is a popular destination for thrill seekers. Visitors have reported strange happenings, like eerie whispers and shadowy figures. The story of the Bell Witch remains one of the most chilling and lasting tales of the supernatural, reminding us that some spirits never truly rest.